What's the best example of, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it that you know of? There's a professor of chemical engineering at my uni. He's internationally acclaimed, has a very successful lab, has earned countless awards in his field and as a professor, and he wrote a textbook used by many different universities for their chemical engineering programs. Anyways, he was caught fucking his dog outside the restroom of a state park near the university. I have no fucking idea why. He told police, he just does it to let off steam. He's been fired from the uni, his lab disbanded, and basically his whole career thrown away. All to fuck his dog? I don't get it. I don't fucking get it. What? Why? I was convinced this had to be made up, but I was wrong. It gets so much worse. Themis Matsoukas, 64, was caught on Pennsylvania Rothrock State Forest security camera footage naked, save for a ski mask, a backpack, his socks, and hiking boots, investigators say. The State Forest trail camera was set up in an attempt to catch suspected thefts from the bathroom. Instead of catching people stealing bags of hand sanitizer, it instead caught a man recording himself performing lewd acts with a dog. American Ninja Warrior winner Drew Drexel. After years of training, competing, and coming up short, he finally won in season 11 and became just the third person to ever achieve total victory, and win the $1 million prize. Months later, he was charged with child sex crimes. The court case is still ongoing, and he could face years in prison and massive fines. And to state the obvious, he will likely never compete again. Wow, crazy, never heard of this. I've watched American Ninja Warrior for years. It confused a lot of fans. He won, and then the next season he disappeared. He actually competed in season 12, but they didn't air his runs. I'm assuming he didn't win, otherwise it would have been tougher to erase him from the season. Truly, not molesting children was the ultimate obstacle. Director of a place I worked sent an employee a dick pic as a long shot. Employee was at a party where she promptly showed other people wondering, what the fuck just happened? He had access to her phone number, but she had never willingly given it out to the director for any social engagements. Obviously, he went through files and found it and thought it was a good idea. The worst part was that it was a picture of someone else's dick that he was claiming to be his. Anyway, he came in after his weekend and, after a brief HR visit, walked out. Oh, his wife worked there too and had just had a baby. The workplace is like high school, so everyone knew what happened about 2 hours after he was walked out. Marriage and career ended in the speed of sending a text. Small big industry, and the news got around fast about the whole ordeal. At the time, the place I worked at was in California, and the place that happened was on the East Coast. It wasn't even a former coworker who told me the story, but my new manager who had never even worked at my old place. I then asked a mutual friend, my ex-husband, if the rumors were true. He confirmed as he was right next to the employee who received the text and unfortunately saw it with his own eyes. How on earth did anyone know it wasn't his dick? The guy was a larger dude, and the pic he sent with a leg shot was someone vastly more fit. Prince Andrew did a good job of keeping a relatively low public profile for years after his divorce. The work he was assigned to didn't require much TV work. Then, after the Epstein accusations, that interview must have been the most excruciating thing I have ever watched. I imagine he walked away thinking he had done a good job, and yet for everyone that watched it, it was the nail in his coffin. His PR advisor told him not to go on and then quit before it. Andrew's an idiot and thought he'd get carried through by his title. Narcissists actually believe they can talk most people into believing whatever they say. It doesn't help that they have grown up being surrounded by yes men who are well paid to blow smoke up His Majesty's anus. Me. I worked at the same company for 10 years and had an excellent reputation. Some wild stuff went down and all the managers except for me had to be replaced. My reputation was fine at that point. Then we hired this crazy guy who was lying and saying strange things a lot, then he was sexually inappropriate with a customer. I reported all of this to my boss. This crazy guy made up even bigger and more compelling lies. About me. They believed him. I didn't do anything fireable, but they transferred me to a different location. I was told that I needed to shape up to save my job, despite 10 years of maximum raises and promotions and glowing feedback. 2 days later, the guy was fired by HR because a customer reported him for sexual harassment. Nobody said a word to me, no apology, nothing. I quit in January. Fuck Office Depot. We had a guy on a super big important call where my boss was speaking, and some guy comes off mute in front of 300 people and says, "Don't get why we gotta be on these stupid fucking calls. They're all just talking out their ass anyway. They're just here to say, oh, look." And it cut off. Way high up, guy that was speaking say, "Darian, guy that was talking trash, finish that sentence for us. What have you got to say?" Silence. "Come on Darian, don't be shy." More silence. "Okay, moving on." My buddy unmuted his phone once while on a national sales call. Everyone heard him order a hot dog, and so the big boss reflected that was why he was eating hot dogs for lunch and not making big bucks. He ended up joining the army. The director of financial aid at the college I worked at posted an ad on Craigslist offering scholarship for sex. When he arrived at the apartment, it was the police who were waiting. His wife worked at that college too. She was pregnant and they had other small children. Different story, same college. A professor rented a room out to a former student and he got busted putting a camera in the dude's shower. 2 counts against him because the guy took a shower with his girlfriend. But at the point the cops got into it, the guy hadn't committed a crime. I am assuming the potential crime was fraudulently giving a scholarship, otherwise my brain needs a kick up the rear. Actually, felony charges of misusing college funds and soliciting prostitution. They set up a fake student account, and he gave them the money. Edit, forgot that there were also charges of burglary, bribery, and using a computer for fraud. Yo, North Idaho College? My wife and I both went there. Yep. My mom ran a daycare for almost 20 plus years. It was her own business that she built up. Not only did I attend it, it was my first real job, and I fell in love with childcare because of it. We were very accommodating, we weren't too strict. Our goal wasn't to get a 3-year-old to read at a 4th grade level, but to give parents what they needed, making sure the kids were safe and well cared for. Helping out along the way with potty training and weaning and such. We had such a long wait list, but still found a way to get the children who really needed it care. My mother sold it to a larger chain daycare when she retired. They made a bunch of changes, made a bunch of promises that kids will be reading, potty trained by 2 to 3, perfect little angels. Every child is different. You know why every child was potty trained by 3? Because if they weren't, they were kicked out. No comfort items at nap time, because they were making little adults instead of babies. It took about 6 months and their wait list was 0. They were offering incentives to sign your child up. They could bring on workers. I think it downsized, but eventually closed. A minister in my hometown died of autoerotic asphyxiation. His congregation didn't even hold a service for him. His family disappeared, and within a week it was like he had never existed. That's kind of sad. Of all the problematic sexual tendencies that pastors and priests are known for having, this seems so harmless. Well, not harmless I suppose. This reminds me of that guy who sold his old company truck to a used car dealer and ended up seeing it in the news with some terrorists in the Middle East driving it. Mounted guns and everything on that thing with his business and his name painted on the side. Great advertising. He was forced to close shop after because of the bad rep. Sad when you think about it since he didn't deserve it, but great example. If I remember correctly, that was Mark I Plumbing out of Texas. I legit felt so bad for that guy. He should have roasted that dealer since removing the logos would have been on them. The backlash on Will Smith for the slap. His and Jada's whole attitudes are pretty whack, and that slap just did it. I don't think they realize how pretentious they come off. That whole red table stuff is cringe. My father grew up believing he was an honest, hardworking, and loyal man. While he was absolutely a hardworking man, finding out when I was 21 that he had another house, woman and child 20 minutes down the street that he went to on his frequent business trips, dispelled the notion that he was honest and loyal. And did the other woman know he had another family? She did. I think she's just as shitty a person as he was. In another life, I would conduct a study, write a book, or do a documentary on men who have 2 separate families. Not just men who cheat, but men who have 2 separate families. Of all the fucked up behavior, this fascinates me to no end. I knew a guy whose father, lawyer, had a family a few miles away. Everyone found out after he dropped dead in his office. My wife's college classmate's husband, airline pilot, had a family in another city. I'm sorry about what you went through, and possibly continue to deal with. How do they have the time? Time isn't the challenge as much as the maintenance and structure are. A successful professional, lawyer, banker, airline pilot, can have a stay-at-home mom who handles the household duties. I'm interested in building the separate lives and keeping them from finding out. Names on the bills, credit cards, social circle, etc. Also, how do you help, raise, and, presumably, love your children knowing you have other children somewhere else? Large government organization I was working for had another related organization added to its portfolio, so as many people as possible from both organizations got together in the foyer of the building, 3,000 people maybe, as the boss talked about the synergies of the two groups, makes sense, etc. etc. There's national news cameras and shit, it's a big deal politically here. Camera pans to the crowd and catches a guy on one of the walkways on the third floor making the machine gun fingers and pretending to shoot thousands of government workers below. Call him former middle management. How about that lady who tweeted something racist right before a flight and by the time it landed she was cancelled and fired from her executive job? That took 5 seconds, not 5 minutes. It's got to be a record. Edit, here's the link. She's often used as an example of cancel culture run amok, but people forget what her job was. Her job was literally publicity for the company, and that is the last job where you want to publicly embarrass yourself and your employer. My former boss in politics, who was hugely respected within his party, and a secretly recovering alcoholic, got so angry about the opposite party winning the election that he fell off the wagon. And then drunkenly sent an email to what would be his new boss calling him a Mormon sister fucker. He was fired, and went on a bender for some time after that. Ended up having to leave the area and move to the East Coast in order to get work. I used to work for an humanitarian aid nonprofit. My old boss was the sweetest, most wholesome, super Christian woman I had ever met. A year after I left that job in 2013, I read an article about how she kidnapped 2 kids from an event she worked because she thought the father was a Satanist or something. He was an atheist. I would have never pegged her as that kind of Christian. There was a social media influencer, don't know her name, who was doing quite well with promoting her fitness wear brand. She was even working on deals with companies like Under Armour and Nike, can't remember the exact brands, but definitely the heavy hitters. She was set to move into the $1 million income bracket. Until a single post. She showed a picture of her and her family eating tacos with the following caption: "We miss Taco Tuesday, so we're having racial slur for Mexicans that starts with W, Wednesday." Instantly cancelled by pretty much everyone, and rightfully so. Brand deals shut down immediately. Followers left in droves. Pretty much killed her career in a single post. Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor and hero of 9/11 to dripping hair, died disbarred drunk. It's really hard to explain to someone who wasn't alive back then how he was really viewed by the country. I can legit remember him at press conference and stuff from back then and now. He's a drug-addled insane person with shit makeup. Joe Paterno was a beloved college football coach, and then it came out he helped cover up for a pedo. He spoon-fed boys to that man. My buddy's dad was the social worker who broke that case. Nobody can believe Paterno didn't burn as well. I know this has been said before, but the utterly embarrassing Fox interview between Jesse Waters and an anti-work mod. That little stunt got the entire mod team at the sub replaced, but not before they all tried to go to the mat for the idiot, admitted they'd gone public to other publications too, including multiple in the US as well as Der Spiegel, and tried to delete and whitewash the whole sub by deleting anyone who wanted to talk about it until it was clear that that was just riling everyone up worse. It was a sub that was founded by anarcho-communists, but had become a sub where people went to vent about abusive employers. The anarcho-communists thought they had millions of kindred spirits instead of just a bunch of people fed up with the labor situation in America and other places and looking for a community to belong to. The idea that people who came here to be angry about being forced to work 120 hours a week, being represented by a part-time dog walker who said 10 hours was too much, was way too much to tolerate, and the rebellion began. Ironically, one of the better examples of mass collective action on Reddit. Now the sub seems to mostly cater to overstressed workers and people coming on to tell their stories of abuse and successfully fighting abuse. I think it's a better sub now than it was before all that happened. Dude I worked with had 30 years in our trade. Other people from other companies would call him for advice. He was a master of his craft. And he was Ned Flanders nice. He was fired for downloading CP on his work computer. A lot of it. Over a period of a few months. Even after he was fired, most people assumed he had been caught using company materials to help do service work at his church, or maybe, at worst, smoking weed. He still had a decade before he could retire, and I don't think he has worked in that decade. I had a similar experience. Worked in a government office supervised by a retired police chief. He was well known and highly respected. Was in his early 60s when I worked for him. He was kinda smarmy, I thought, and didn't know anything about the job I did, 911 dispatcher, as he's gotten the job through the old boys network. But nothing in my interaction with him caused me to think he was who he was revealed to be. He was investigated and fired for downloading CP on his government-issued computer. This was over 20 years ago, and so far as I know the guy is still in prison. If I recall correctly, this was a federal offense, so no parole possible. There was a certain pastor in my town who was secretly the most evil scumbag imaginable. He was in rehab for his severe alcoholism, and pretty much the moment he got out he wanted revenge. His wife had left him and moved away, so he drove to Maine to get his revenge. His ex and their son were not home, but his daughter had been visiting them at the time. He murdered her and then shot himself. His daughter was someone I knew from school, so it still haunts me thinking about what happened to her. It also turns out that this dude's first wife fell off a cliff when she was pregnant with his child. Pretty sure he killed her too. Wait, is this a famous case? Only locally. It did get some news attention at the time. My former stepfather. He went from a job that he had for 15 plus years, bi-monthly bonuses, 1-hour lunches every day, and 3 days off a week, to smoking meth, hoarding junk to tweak on, and stealing anything he could to get more. Man, I'm sorry you had to have that in your life. I appreciate that man. He was honestly the best guy before he got into drugs. Knew more about audio setup and electronics in general than anybody I've ever met. Meth took that all from him, but I can remember when he was a productive and valued member of society, and that's what hurts the most. Seeing a man fall so far from grace, only to never recover. Last I heard, he was living in the closet of his dealer's house. Yes, but in a good way. He ruined a bad reputation. So, my cousin is special, which is to say, autistic. As such, he got sheltered as a child and teenager by his mother and came into adulthood as a spoiled, sheltered man-child who could barely function socially and wasted his money on stupid shit. Basically, he was like Chris Chan but didn't make videos of himself. He went incognito from 90% of the family when he was like 23 10 years ago, and did his own thing away from the rest of us, and nobody complained about that. We heard about him getting and losing jobs, getting into fights with people, doing drugs, etc., but turns out it was exclusively the bad stuff that got around. Last Christmas, as it turns out, he was clean, no drugs. That spoiled toxic attitude he used to have was gone, and he was cooking burgers for everyone at the family Christmas dinner. They were delicious. He'd apparently been holding down a steady job the last 6 years, hadn't been in a fight for about that long, and refers to his drug years as my stoner days, and jokes about them. But the 5 minutes that really turned his reputation around? My sister started choking on an underchewed piece of burger. We were all talking amongst ourselves and didn't notice, but he did. He left the stove, ran over, started palm striking her in the back and got her to cough up the big lump of unchewed burger and bun. We didn't notice anything was wrong till the first strike. Once she coughed it up, he just says nonchalantly, "Yeah, see? There's your problem." Like a mechanic noticing something wrong in an engine, gesturing to the lump. He showed us all up that day and proved to all of us that we were completely wrong about him, or at the very least what we knew was severely outdated and negatively biased.